Welcome to the Low Carb USA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Okay, so I have Dr. Gary Fettke back with me again. About a year ago or so, we did a talk on YouTube. We talked a bit about your recovery and putting your brain tumor into remission through learning about the low carbohydrate diet. And then we talked about your persecution because you were trying to take it to your patients and you were reported by a registered dietitian 3 times, exactly. So I kind of want to move on from that. And you were asked a question quite recently that I was very moved by your response. So I'm kind of going to put that question to you again now. And that is, now that you've been exonerated, what are you going to do now?
Well, I'm back to my practice full time. I've decided to take up golf again, because that's something I can't solve. And but look, what we've come to realise, and certainly what I've been doing the last few years, is a major mentoring role. It's been absolutely critical that Tim Noakes gets off, that I was exonerated, Anna Dahlqvist originally in Sweden. And there are 3 public scenarios where the concept of low carb, healthy fat living has been challenged, where we've all been reported to our medical boards and we've now been fully exonerated. That really has opened the door to say that in the Western world, that if you're challenged on this, you are going to be supported not only by precedent, but also by us. And I've certainly been involved in helping other practitioners literally get off their charges. Effectively, they've been reported in their medical boards in one way or another for giving exactly the same advice. And I don't think any medical boards around the Western world want to go there again. I mean, we're not going to lose on the science. The more we talk about the science, the more this is becoming mainstream, the whole concept of cutting out processed food, eating real food, cutting back on sugar, that's all we're suggesting. And when you realise that the dietary guidelines have been manipulated as much as they are, I honestly don't think that the bureaucracy wants to go down the path of what we've uncovered, which is really that the guidelines have been written by vested interests and are now being enforced by vested interests who are influencing medical boards. That's what happened with me. We've pretty well shown that the food industry, either directly or indirectly via the Dietitians Association in Australia, were influencing the Medical Board of Australia. That's just criminal. We cannot have that ever again. So where we are, we're actually supporting people who are wanting to make that change as individuals. We're certainly supporting those medical professionals, those healthcare professionals, not just in Australia, but right around the world, who want to make a difference, and to tell them and say it's okay to give this advice. We've been contacted by hundreds of doctors said, look, thank you. You've now meant that I can actually proceed on with this and give this advice safely, knowing that my medical registration is not I'm not going to lose it. The trouble is, however, I also get people who still come up to me and say, I feel threatened. Nurse practitioners, dentists, physiotherapists who say, I'm still concerned that if I give this advice, I'm going to get into trouble. I honestly don't think they are now. I think that the precedent has been set throughout the Western world. It hasn't been very high profile in the US, but I know of 2 cases or 2 practitioners that have had that pressure put upon them, and it's gone no further. So that's a massive role to play going forward. And we're here to support those that want to make that difference for themselves, for their patients, and then for their communities. The biggest thing for us is to know now who's been behind it. If you find that you're accused, and that you're being reported, we now know that this is actually almost certainly a kickback from the food industry in one way or another, or vested interests that have kicking back. And one of the problems I had, Tim Noakes had, is we actually didn't know who we were actually fighting. And if you are going into a game not knowing who your opposition is, you know, it's like trying to play tennis against yourself. You've got no idea what you're doing. If you never know you're turning up to a football match if there's only one team there, or your opposition's completely hidden and ghosts and cloaks and daggers. We now know who is coming at you. And it will almost certainly be vested interest and almost certainly having some corporate issues there. And, you know, backed up by, you know, religious ideology. And we know where all that's coming from now. So you're no longer powerless, because that's knowing who your opposition is means you can fight back. Well, you can certainly defend and stand your ground. That's all we did for the last several years, stand our ground, because when you know you're right, it's much easier to stand there. And that's all we did. You know, I was incredibly supported by Belinda, and we had our ups and downs. You know, I was down, she was up, she was down, I was up. We've gone that roller coaster over a long period of time. We don't want anyone else to go on that roller coaster, and we think we can shorten that whole trip for everyone else. Yeah, so moving on, I think that you know, the cat's out of the bag. The message of LCHF, low carb, healthy fat living, is, you know, keto, and you know, those people who want to take it further into carnivore, it's safe. That's all we want to do. We want to see that this is seen as a safe option for those people that want to do it, and it be considered such, and they can be supported. We want that seen at a medical education level. We want to see that supported in the community and at a dietary guideline level. And I think the times that are upon us that it is going to be seen to be safe, whether or not it's in 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. I've already been proven wrong on that naivety. I originally said, oh, this will be over in 6 or 12 months to Belinda, when I worked out about sugar.
Tim thought that as well.
Yeah, you know, it's a complete no-brainer. This is, you know, we're talking about food guidelines and eating based on biochemistry and the right fuel in your tank. You don't put the wrong petrol or diesel in your car. It doesn't work, and that's what we've been doing for 40 or 50 years. Total disaster. Let's just go back to putting real food in our mitochondria and getting on with it.
Yeah, awesome. That's such a cool message, and a cool mission that you feel like you have. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and also for coming all the way out from Australia, you and Belinda, to come and speak at our conference that's just gone this past weekend. It was an awesome privilege to have you up on that stage, and we hope you can come back again one day.
Yeah, well, we haven't finished. We're running low carb, so there's plenty left in the fuel tank.
There we go. Exactly. Awesome, Gary. Thank you.
And look, thank you to yourself and Pam for your hospitality. We've just been it's been a joy to be here, and a humbling experience to get the support that we've had.
Yeah, you were mentioning as we were coming up here that you were amazed at the people that were reaching out to you and just saying, like, thank you for doing what you did to help all of us.
But you've got to know Belinda. She's I'm being thanked for just being stubborn. You know?
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Gary.
Okay.
So you'll notice that we haven't had any commercials at all during this podcast, and we intend to keep it like that if we possibly can. But at the same time, the work that we're doing and the efforts that we're going to get the clinical guidelines done, there's just so much to do. And in order to really, for this to be sustainable, we need your help. And so what we're asking you to do is go and take a look at our Patreon account. There's actually quite a few options there. It provides you with options to actually go onto our site, and there's membership options there where you can get access to all our video content and other perks of being a member, or even just, you know, $1 a month, become a patron. And you can find that in patreon.com/LowCarbUSA. I'll put it in the show notes and in the episode notes so that you can find it. And yeah, help us to change the world.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people take a look at the conference registrations, and I think they immediately assume that, you know, from a distance, that these might be money-making endeavors that we're doing with these conferences. And you know, it's hard to admit, and it's hard to tell people that we really aren't making any money from these. all 11 of the events that we've done have not been a profitable endeavor. We've literally had to dip into our credit, basically. It wasn't anything. It wasn't like we actually had a pocket to dip into and put money into. We've had to take loans and get a lot of credit for these events. So any little bit that you can help, every ticket that's sold, every little bit of $1 a month in a Patreon account will help us to fund our endeavors and fund the programs, so that we continue to do some of these other things that are free content. The project management that we're doing on the clinical guidelines will really go a long way.